In 1924, Henry Cabot Lodge of Massachusetts, because he had an Italian population in the north end of Massachusetts, particularly around Hanover Street, if you're familiar with Boston,
Hmm.
he, in the background, created what is known as the Johnson-Reed Act of 1924, which restricted Italian population to 5,000 people a year. And they went out and actively recruited more Northern Europeans, particularly German, English, and back then even Irish. Things changed for the Irish and Northern Europeans to the disadvantage of Italians. In 1924, Calvin Coolidge signed a bill, but they said Calvin Coolidge would sign anything he put in front of him. But although he was a Republican, um, um, Henry Cabot Lodge Sr. Was behind the bill, and that's called the Johnson-Reed Act of 1924, the Immigration Restriction Act, and people can research that and read the history of that. So all the way up to 1924, Bob, it was bad. My dad grew up in that stories he told me. Italian kids would play with the black kids in New Orleans, and the cops. And I was a New Orleans policeman at one time in the '70s, and my dad didn't like that too much. But um, he, they would run the kids off the corner, make them go inside, even in sweltering summers before air conditioning. So it was tough for being black, being Italian. Even the Jewish kids were picked on a little bit in this neighborhood around the mid city in New Orleans, where Italians and then blacks and Jews all got together and lived cheek to jowl with one another, and it just something that the prejudice was so endemic at that time. So it was a tough time for these guys. So to answer your question, I think things were bad for the Italian community all the way up to World War II. And
Well,
then
and even that was still in the effect afterwards because my uncle, my mother's oldest brother, he had stayed. He was a baby, 2 or 3 years old when my grandparents came here, and they left him behind with his grandparents, and he had to wait in Canada for 4 years to come to America, even though he had four brothers who fought in the war for America.
no, my
He's
dad was
he,
wounded in Normandy.
he still had to wait in Canada for close to
Yeah,
5 years, 4 or 5 years with his family.
my dad was in the 29th Infantry Division and was wounded landed in Omaha Beach and was eventually wounded in Normandy, in St. Lo, France, which is about 20 miles north of or south of Omaha Beach. I just read just the other day that 10% of the American fighting force in World War II, both in Pacific Theater and the Atlantic Theater, were Italian
Hmm.
Americans. I walked the cemetery in Normandy, in Colleville-sur-Mer. That's where the major cemetery is in France. There's a lot of Italian American names on those white crosses that you cannot forget. And any American who wants to be reminded of their American origins and their freedoms should go to Normandy and walk that cemetery. It'll hit you right in the gut and hit
Well,
you hard.
that's why Roosevelt had to do away with the Italians on the enemies list, right? He needed us to fight. He needed us to
Well,
fight.
a lot of people don't know that Italians were interred like the
Hmm.
Japanese.
Hmm.
If you go back there was a major internment camp in Missoula, Montana. And not too many people when you hear about internment camps, you think about the Japanese being interned. But you dig deep, and I dug a little deep into it. Even Joe DiMaggio's father lost his fishing boat
Yes.
in
Hmm.
San Francisco.